I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Avril Dutheil, the core contributor at Neutron. Avril, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Ashton. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. I know you've been working on Neutron as a founding member for a few years now, building out in the Cosmos ecosystem. Excited to dive into everything Cosmos. It's a complex ecosystem that I think has a lot of benefits to the overall blockchain ecosystem of all the blockchains and the interconnectability of them. So I'm excited to dive into your insights on that. But let's just start from the top for those who aren't familiar with Neutron and sort of what is Neutron, and then we'll dive into all those details.
Yeah, for sure. So Neutron is the most secure cross-chain smart contracting platform, basically. Now, unpacking that slightly, there's essentially like two main components that make Neutron like what it is. The first one is that it's the first blockchain to be secured by the validator set and the stake of another blockchain. In this case, the Cosmos Hub, which is the first blockchain that was launched in Cosmos, the most capitalized blockchain as well. And so it means that the $2 billion of value of Atom at stake on the Cosmos Hub today are also at stake on Neutron and have been securing the blockchain since block one, essentially. So that's a very interesting feature in terms of but the security that it provides to Neutron, as well as the very deep alignment that it creates between the Cosmos Hub and the Neutron blockchain. The other side of Neutron is that beyond being a general purpose smart contract platform, it provides advanced cross-chain infrastructure that allow applications to retrieve data from other blockchains and to execute transactions, own accounts and assets, and have programmatic sequences of actions to be executed on other blockchains as well. All of this being built on top of a cross-chain communication protocol called IBC, which is one of the most secure cross-chain messaging standard out there today.
Okay, great. And I want to unpack that a little bit because it is a lot. And so from what I understand, IBC is one of those very important aspects of Cosmos, and interconnectability of blockchains is super important to be able to move assets and applications throughout different ecosystems. Now, for Neutron, to give an example of, you want to create an application that uses smart contracts and you want to connect to other blockchains. Could you give an example for like a DeFi app where there's a lot of DeFi applications on the Ethereum ecosystem, for example? People are lending, they have assets, they want to move it over. Would that be something that where Neutron and Cosmos would fit into?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to give a bit of context, let's go back to Ethereum, right? On Ethereum, when you have in a wallet somewhere and on Ethereum, you can deploy them into an application, then you can synchronously interact with another application as well, right? So you can compose very easily different types of applications, different smart contracts. Now, the problem with this is that you share the same infrastructure for all of these things. And so one, you have less ability to customize the infrastructure for these applications. So each application has to work within the same trade-off space that is enshrined by Ethereum itself. And two, because the resources are shared, if there's too much demand for like block space and such, then you get congestions and scalability issues. And so very early on, Cosmos sort of pioneered an alternative model to the current vertical scaling model that Ethereum has engaged in, which was the idea that actually we can just spin up new blockchains and tailor them to applications so that you get the best customizability and performance on one side, and then on the second side you don't have the problem of scarcity because you're essentially creating new block space for each application. Right? Now, this is a very powerful vision, but at the same time it creates one major issue, which is now that you've separated every application onto different blockchains, how do you allow users and applications to basically communicate with one another and transfer value and compose together, right? And so IBC is a standard, a way to make blockchains communicate as securely as possible that was designed to solve this problem. So what it, you can see it as a bridge, basically. It is a bridge protocol, essentially. But it is very advanced in that, one, it has its trust assumptions are so that as long as you trust the blockchains that you're interacting with, you don't need to trust IBC itself, right? IBC is as secure as the chains that you're interacting with, essentially, which is a much better trust assumption than a lot of other bridge mechanisms out there. The other thing is that you can build very advanced features on top of IBC because let's stick it at that. Basically, you can build very advanced features on it, which essentially allow you to build applications that essentially exist across multiple blockchains. Now, in practice, that's been the case for since the inception of IBC. So in theory, in practice, it's actually a bit more complicated than this because when you want to do these more advanced use cases on top of IBC, you need to develop a standard for it, and then the blockchains need to adopt that standard, and so that takes some time, right? But we have initial standards that are extremely versatile, and what Neutron does is it basically makes them available to smart contracts. And so what that entire setup recreates is you get the ability to build an application that not only leverages the benefits of being on the same general purpose platform like on Ethereum, e.g., ability to synchronicity, the ability to easily compose smart contracts together, but you also now get the ability to have these smart contracts integrate with applications that are on different, on other blockchains, right? So one example use case for this would be, Cosmos as an ecosystem of 50 plus proof of stake chains has obviously a lot of staking, right? There's a lot of value locked in staking today. And because the staking rates are the staking reward rates are pretty high, there's a disincentive to take this value and then deploy it in DeFi, right? And so one of the things that's required in order to bridge this gap is to provide a way that people can be securing the chains, participating in staking, but at the same time also participating in DeFi, right? And there's a solution for that. It's called liquid staking. Lido has made it extremely successful on Ethereum. It was actually pioneered in the idea. It's pioneered in Cosmos actually, and so it applies very well to Cosmos basically. But one of the problems of liquid staking in Cosmos is if you were to build a smart contract to do liquid staking, to be able to provide liquid staking for each of these blockchains, you would have to redeploy your smart contract every time, and now you would be managing, maintaining 50 versions of your contracts, which is not really scalable or it doesn't work at scale, let's say. And so what Neutron provides is the ability for you to build one set of smart contract that handle the business logic and leverage IBC to basically retrieve the information that the protocol needs to operate from the other blockchains, and then take the stake to these blockchains, delegate them, and manage the stake there, right? So you have one set of smart contract providing one service, not to one blockchain, but to an entire ecosystem of blockchains. And so while that's already exciting in its own right today, as it applies to all Cosmos blockchains, I think in the next year or two, we're going to see the true potential of that capability as new ecosystems are being onboarded. Polkadot very recently, but Ethereum, Avalanche, rollups on Celestia, and others, right? And so then suddenly your application, which had the ability to provide services, leverage the markets and the feature sets of 50 Cosmos blockchains, now has the ability to do that not just within Cosmos and the interchain, but throughout the industry as a whole, basically.
Wow, very cool. And with these 50 chains that have launched, I know that Cosmos is a good blockchain ecosystem for the IBC, and that also the app chains, sort of that independent running, where on Ethereum you're sort of like stuck under the parent chain. There's a lot more limitations from what I understand, at least from a scalability perspective. But I'm curious about the adoption of it, where it's at, because I know you would know a lot more being deep in the Cosmos ecosystem, at least from a marketing side or from people that are outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. I haven't heard a lot of adoption of applications that are on these different chains right now. Do you know where that's at?
Yeah, I mean, so from taking a step back, I think the curse of Cosmos has always been being very ahead in terms of the technology and the infrastructure, but sort of not putting enough efforts onto the BD marketing side of things, and therefore kind of potentially lacking adoption. That being said, there are very very prestigious applications in Cosmos currently. Like Osmosis is probably a very good example of the Cosmos centric application that really worked out. It's one of the largest DEX in the industry. but you also have like new projects that don't necessarily brand themselves as Cosmos, but that have been, very high profile and that use Cosmos technology. And that's a real definition of the Cosmos ecosystem, right? Like what uses the Cosmos stack. Like the Binance chain was actually built with the Cosmos stack. Say it's built with the Cosmos stack, Bear Chain, Celestia, all of these projects are actually part of Cosmos in one way. So yeah, I would say the adoption is not too shabby in that regard.
That's great to hear. And yeah, I think you don't often hear about it, but which is probably a good thing as long as it's getting adopted by platforms that are using it. It's like when blockchain reaches mainstream adoption, people that are using some future neo-banking app on their phone, they're not going to care what blockchain is actually being used underneath. They're just using the application. It just so happens that Cosmos is running the future of the internet, but you don't really need to know the intricacies because it gets very technical. Trying to learn about the cross-chain and how it actually works. It's interesting if you're deep into the tech, but sometimes people just want to use, they just want to use the Osmosis DEX and not care. As long as they know it's secure, then that's good enough for them.
Pretty much. I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the reasons why we focus on, building out this infrastructure so that you can have an application that exists on whatever tech stack, whatever chain they want, and the user itself doesn't have to, know or care about it, because what they know is that everything is, integrated and secure in the backend, and when they just try to use it, it just works. And then that for the user, that just makes things easier, and then for the application developer, that allows them to basically go to the markets where they'll have the most strategic advantages without having to, close their options basically, and to leverage the feature set that matter the most to them basically. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm. And I know you've been working on this part of the project for a long time now, but could you explain more on the stage of where exactly you're at? From what I understand, there's still more of the mainnet launch and things to come.
Well, so the mainnet is live currently, actually. It has been running since May 10th. It has bootstrapped a pretty good degree of adoption. And what's like super interesting is that we're headed now towards a phase where there's very bullish developments, like very interesting developments. There has been a proposal to merge to do like a first protocol merger in Cosmos history, essentially by acquiring another project that had built a DEX as a baseline, like a base chain infrastructure, and to merge it into the Neutron binary as a piece of infrastructure for the ecosystem. That's, I think, a super exciting development. There are initiatives to make Neutron a better settlement layer for rollups, and to integrate closely with the upcoming Celestia ecosystem. There's a lot of initiatives on the liquid staking front as well to help release some of the liquidity that's locked into the ecosystem, but also to import liquidity from Ethereum and more established ecosystems. And there's also a very incredible team called TimeWave working on, I think, a pretty unique primitive called the allocator, which essentially is a suite of tools of programmatic, like trustless contracts that allow DAOs and blockchains themselves to actually enter deals with each other to bootstrap liquidity, to do, to get exposure to one another, to provide security to one another, and the like. And I think like this sort of like creates an entire new field of sort of like protocol diplomacy, if you will. And so yeah, that's obviously very early today. But seeing this sort of like on the rise is something that has been super interesting. There's sort of like the team that pioneered this idea is the team that that is building it today, and that wrote the Atom 2.0 white paper. What's interesting is to see that other ecosystems like Polkadot have actually taken the idea, internalized it, and started trying to design their own as well, to see how that primitive within the context of Polkadot could be used to like further the relationship between parachains as well, which proves that there's some uptake for it as well.
Wow, very cool. And speaking on the security, obviously when you have cross-chain, you mentioned that the security is only as good as the chains that you're connecting to, because it doesn't really have to rely on IBC. I was looking into Neutron and I saw that you guys have a technology called replicated security. I'm curious if you can touch on the security risks involved and how replicated security helps mitigate any of those risks when people are moving assets or launching apps?
So replicated security doesn't necessarily deal with the security of the cross-chain messaging. It more so deals with the security of Neutron itself as a platform, right? So today, what makes Ethereum secure is that there's billions of dollars of ETH at stake, and if you wanted to take over the protocol, censor or infringe on the block production, you would need to have enough capital to basically capture a large enough share of that value, basically. Now that's the same in Cosmos, where you also have like proof of stake blockchains. And one of the challenges historically has been that, as a new blockchain, you need to bootstrap a very high market cap for your application to be secure, for your blockchain to be secure. But for you to bootstrap a very high market cap, you also need your application to be successful, but it's difficult to be successful without being secure. And so you have this bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? And so replicated security as a technology allows you to sort of like skip this entire bootstrapping phase by essentially enabling the established validator set of the Cosmos Hub and the established proof of stake asset atom of the Cosmos Hub to be used to secure another blockchain, right? It's basically in production version of some of the ideas that EigenLayer is working on with restaking. It's Cosmos restaking essentially, and it's live today. Neutron is the first blockchain to actually leverage that technology. And so what that does is that, one, it allowed Neutron to be one of the top 10 chains by staked capitalization, staked value on day one through Atom. And two, it creates this very tight relationship where the fate of both the Cosmos Hub and Neutron are intrinsically tied, and there's a strong incentive to make each other very successful, because Neutron benefits from the hub being successful in that it becomes more secure, and the hub benefits from Neutron being more successful in that it gets additional revenue from that, essentially.
Wow, very cool. And what are sort of now that it's been launched and it's doing well so far, what are the next steps in growing it or getting more traction on Neutron?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like Neutron is still, it's still a young blockchain, and so it still is going through this bootstrapping phase where we're making sure that all of the required building blocks are falling into places. The ability to trade, take on leverage, liquid stake, and all of the other sort of like core DeFi functionalities, the ability to manage and like to create and manage DAOs as well. So all of these things are being launched as we speak. The next steps, in my opinion, are getting to a stage where there is the economy on Neutron is so dynamic that there's a vast amount of intrinsic economic opportunities to help sort of like drive developer adoption, right? Because one of the curses of Cosmos has been that while you can subsidize development, the way that you succeed is to actually have people that are committed because they see that there's an opportunity here that they can seize, and therefore they're intrinsically motivated to actually do things, right? And so we're really trying to get to that stage where Ethereum is, and where I'm sure Neutron will be soon. And so that takes a lot of forms, right? Like what I described earlier was sort of a framework to help bootstrap that economy by creating new value, as we've done with Neutron itself and the Neutron token, and as other projects are currently doing. Like Celestia launching is also a massive milestone in terms of like the value, the liquidity into the ecosystem. So creating liquidity, releasing liquidity, and so the treasury management by putting the community pools into circulation, enabling them to participate in the economy rather than just be idle capital in a pool in a module somewhere. But through liquid staking to enable the value at stake to also participate in the economy. So creating, releasing, importing. We're working on bridging pretty high profile assets from the Ethereum ecosystem as a way to sort of enable applications in Cosmos to get exposure to another really good reserve asset beyond Atom, which is like Ethereum and its liquid stake derivatives. And finally, there's optimizing, right? Like once you have a significant amount of value in the ecosystem, you need to ensure that that value is appropriately allocated so that the economy is as dynamic as possible. And so we're doing a lot of work to optimize the execution, but also aggregate liquidity, make it like dynamically allocated across the ecosystem. So not just Neutron, but the entire ecosystem has access to the liquidity that it needs in order to really take the applications to the next level.
Wow, thank you for that. And there's a lot of people in the blockchain industry that envision this cross-chain communication protocol to one day be seamless and be able to trade assets between all of the chains, whether you have Bitcoin moving to Ethereum, moving to Cosmos, moving to Solana, back and forth here and there. But I feel like there's still a few steps to be taken to get to that point. I'm curious on at least sort of the building blocks of, say you had some Ether and you wanted to move, or Ethereum tokens, you wanted to move back and forth into the Cosmos ecosystem in a decentralized way where there's always self-custody in sort of cross-chain atomic swaps kind of thing. What is that, is that possible, or what is that going to take with the Cosmos ecosystem and whatever it's going to take on Ethereum to make that happen so that everyone understands that that's something that can easily be done?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you can do today by relying on third-party bridges like Axel or Wormhole, which are very impressive pieces of technology. They do have one downside though, which is that using them as bridges requires you to trust not just the chains in this context, but also the bridge itself, right? And so what I think is a very exciting sort of future step is IBC and IBC like protocols like Hyperlane connecting Cosmos chains directly to Ethereum. And so one of the that's already possible today. Hyperlane, for example, can be deployed on Ethereum, although you don't have the same trust assumptions as IBC. Now, for IBC specifically, to be deployed on Ethereum, the main blocker today has been gas. Essentially, the way that IBC works is, on both sides of the connection, you run a light client, e.g., a succinct version of the blockchain, so that you can check that the transactions that you're receiving from that chain are valid. They are conform to the actual history of the blockchain, right? Now, doing this in practice is very manageable for tenement chains because they are pretty scalable and they have the these light clients are in the protocol itself, and so there's no strict gas limits to be fulfilled. So that just works. But for other ecosystems, and especially the EVM, which is a bit less scalable itself on the Ethereum mainnet, you just having to verify all of these proofs on chain basically runs into like gas limits. And so there's a number of teams like Succinct, Electron, Union, and Polymer, and others working on various systems, either direct, e.g., like you would have the light clients on both sides and create the connections with Ethereum directly, or through a chain that routes them but has better security properties to basically make that possible. And a lot of them use, zero knowledge technology to do this, so that you can take the load of computation of the chain and just submit the proof that it was done properly, which is a lot more gas efficient.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I hope, I know about Axelar, we've had them on the show as well, and I know they're making great improvements towards this, but I have a feeling like eventually here it's going to be even more seamless and hopefully expand out to the other blockchains as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the cross-chain messaging part of this industry is going to change pretty drastically in the year or so to come, and especially as there's more and more focus and resources, even in the Ethereum ecosystem, right? This sort of friction that cross rollup communications introduce is something that I think is on the top of the mind, on the top of a lot of builders' minds. And so there's a lot more main chain and resources going into fixing these problems. And so yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting trend to watch.
Very exciting. And what is the best way for people to learn more about Neutron and try it out and get involved with the Cosmos ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our Twitter is probably a good place to really get the latest updates from Neutron. So that would be at neutron_org. Also our website, neutron.org. And then more generally, there's the Cosmos Network forums and the Neutron forums are also if you want to get very deep into the weeds, then that's the best place to do so.
Sounds great, Avril. I will leave those in the description as well. Appreciate your insights into the Cosmos ecosystem. All the best with Neutron. Keep growing out blockchain. I appreciate the work that you and your team have done. Would love to follow up in the near future to learn more about Neutron at a later date.
With great pleasure. Thanks for having me.